How many of you guys you don't feel the same way after you eat? Some foods may make you sick now, right? You just can't, you're trying to go back to things that you once liked, but in your own way, you're finding out that they're doing more damage than good. Some of you think, oh, wow, this is miserable, right? My teeth aren't working. My stomach's not working. My system's not working. You're trying to eat the same stuff over and over again. You don't know how blessed you are. You have no idea how blessed you are. And let me tell you why. There's some things I've noticed about us, humanity, over time. And do you not know that if you abruptly change somebody's diet, they can become mentally cruel to people? It gives them an attitude. Your body does not process chemicals the same or anything else. Do you guys know that? Do you know that? You're blessed. If you can't consume foods like you used to, you're blessed. Because I have a recommendation for everybody. Cut back on your flavor palettes. Cut back. It's a good time to start that right away. Some of us get a jump start. Now, I'm going to share something with you guys. Before I was deployed, this happened more than a few times. Before I was deployed, not knowing the situation, once you get in theater, because you don't know the situation, I noticed a change in my eating habits. Not because, I didn't have knowledge of being deployed. We were always on call. We get one of those red bayonets at any time. So I didn't really know if we'd be, end up in the desert or in a cold weather region, whatever the case was. You just didn't know. But I did notice that before I was deployed, my appetite changed big time. There was a time when I would normally eat a few cakes or something like that after dinner or something like that. And I noticed I couldn't eat sweets anymore one time. I just couldn't do it. There was another time I couldn't drink sodas anymore. Each one of these times was before deployment. Well, come to find out, when we were deployed, we were in areas where you couldn't have any sodas. We had ended up in places where we didn't count on being there for so long. And so we did not have ample supplies. Some of these guys, because they couldn't get certain foods, some of them, they just could not perform like someone normally would. They couldn't mentally perform. It really spent them. There are so many occasions like that. Before something happens, your diet changes, right? Something's going to happen to the whole of the USA, and it's a good time for people to cut back on their flavor palettes, right? Because some folks have an absolute, somewhat like an addiction to certain types of food. Maybe you only like Pepsi, and if you don't get your Pepsi, you're going to have a bad attitude. You don't think the Lord knows this? So what happens when you still have your money, but you can't buy any more Pepsi or Coke or root beer or any substitute? What happens then? To go through that drastic of a change in your diet can actually cause you some issues and problems. I'm saying you're blessed because everybody's eating habits are soon to change. Everybody's. Have you been taking note of your stores that you still have product on the shelves, but the product is changing? Have you noticed that? Maybe you didn't notice trade was cut by at least 50%. Some of the products that we normally receive, we can't receive anymore because critical ingredients are no longer being supplied to the USA. Have you noticed that certain crops have all but died out, and there are certain foods you'll never eat again? Bringing certain foods out of a stockpile only works for so long until it totally runs out, and then that's the end of that. Haven't you guys noticed? Some of you guys have other habits, right? That if you can't have it, you're going to go berserk. My advice to you is start changing that now. Get used to bland foods again. Because you certainly won't have what you want to have. That's not going to happen. A lot of people have stockpiled supplies. We're going to have a mold problem here shortly. And believe me, you can't hide from things like that. It will find its way just about everywhere. But for a great many Christians, they're finding out they can't eat the foods they used to eat. They're starting to find that out. Your body is responding differently. It's changing somehow. That's a blessing. It's a blessing because it may not ever be available again, or you certainly may go through a time where you still have the means to buy something, but you can't get it. And you know what's worse than anything is when you have the means to get something, but it's no longer supplied. Think about that. There are a lot of Christians right now, they say, well, I need help smoking. Don't worry, you're going to get a helping hand. When you just can't find them anymore. In fact, there are going to be a few things that won't be found anymore. I don't know if you've noticed, but as we get further and further into different foreign policies, and we treat each nation is doing something different for its own people, a lot of nations right now are in this emergency type of stance where they are not exporting things like they used to. They're saving it all for their people. It's changing. It's changing. Supply and demand is changing. You're going to keep your money. We know this by reading the Bible. If you read the Bible, you notice that people are still buying and selling. You just need the mark to continue to do that. If you live in that time, which means the money system is going to continue for a long time. Even during the Great Depression, people were telling folks, Christians were saying, don't worry, this time will pass. We'll get back on our feet and have our money back. And sure enough, that happened. But a lot of people during that time, guess what? During the Great Depression, they had to learn to live off dough, cheese. They couldn't have the meats that they once had. There were a lot of families, they didn't eat meat at all. And they had to provide some type of protein because there is a disease that forms when you don't have protein. Those days are coming back again. Again. It'll be very strained. You see, the weather has been beating down in our crops. And maybe you don't know this, but all you have to do is start looking up farmland in Texas, and you're going to find out who just recently bought up a bunch of farmland in Texas to put wind farms there. It's not the U.S. government. It's a foreign entity. A foreign entity has bought up a lot of land in Texas for wind farms. Not the government, but a government outside of the USA. That's who's buying up the wind farms. That's who's putting in the wind farms. Foreign entities. So the people in Texas who are selling the property to just anybody, they shouldn't have done that because now they're owned by foreign entities. They're the ones putting the wind farms up there because nobody in the U.S. wants the lands. I got to be careful not to lose my hat because this happens all over the U.S. If people would just look into the truth and not buy, not purchase everything. Did China buy it? Nope, China didn't buy that land in Texas. They sure did not. You would think they would have, right? And they do certainly own certain ranches in Texas. There was a recent ranch bought up by China in Texas, but they don't own it. No. Now, you got to look near Europe, and you'll find out. And you would think it was some sort of a federal government back deal. It was not. See, there's a lot of undercutting, a lot of dirty stuff that goes on that people don't know about. And they let people in the public arena talk about this stuff, and they don't refute it. And so people start believing the narrative of the public. Because the public, they may hear a rumor that sounds plausible or something like that, and then they'll say, well, what in the world? So Gates doesn't own as near as much as some other nations in the U.S. See, that's precisely what I'm talking. A lot of people think, well, Bill Gates bought up this and the other, and he owns this. If you have to look into it, you'll see it. It's not Bill Gates. He's not the problem. We have some other folks in other places that are getting us, and no one ever talks about them. No one ever mentions them. No one. It just shocks me. But I'm sure that now you're going to find that out. Now you'll find it out. Because when you're talking about they own 45%, yeah, there's a problem with that. Oh, and by the way, again, I see people mentioning China. No, that's more of a rumor than anything else. If you start looking into the truth and start pulling paperwork, you're going to find out it's not China. You would think it was China. It's not China. Nope, it's not China. That is part of one of these stories that went around that nobody ever went against, right? So it's not China. And we're talking about Texas, the heartland of the USA. We're talking about Texas, and it's not China. It will shock you to know. So go look it up. You'll find it out. I wish it was. I wish somebody like Japan did own it. That would make it a little better, but that's not the case. And it's not China. It's not the ones either. When I saw the dockets, I couldn't believe it myself. But then I saw that same name pop up in several other places. And I said, well, what is going on here? What is going on here? And no one is discussing it. Let me share this with you. When people begin to talk about a subject, and these days with social media, you have to be careful. When people start talking about subjects, some people assume things, and when it sounds plausible, everybody else will pick up on it. Well, if nobody refutes it with evidence, right, then somebody else is going to create some evidence or say they heard something or they saw something or this happened and that happened, but you really won't know for real. Because if somebody knew for real, they would have mentioned it already. They didn't. Right? They didn't do it. Canada owns quite a bit in Texas. That's one of the places, but that's not the major place. The major place is near Europe, and it's not China. See, this is what really, when there's so many stories that I hear and people talk about it, I don't say much about it because I'm not getting into it, but a lot of people will take up a rumor, right? And it really does sound plausible. And then they'll start spreading that rumor. But I'm talking about good people do this because they cannot get the paperwork, or maybe the internet is flooded with popular things, because that's what happens when something gets popular, right? It goes to the front pages of a search engine. It doesn't make it true, but it goes to the front pages. All of a sudden, people start commenting on these stories that some of them are just flat out not real. Right? Which they let it go on like this, and the government doesn't even refute it. It's almost like when people get in these conversations, it can mask a lot of dirty things that go on, behind the scenes. The people make a subject first. The truth does not make a subject first. You have to remember that when you're looking at anything from the internet. Popularity is going to make that article first, not the truth. So you have to really think of that. But not only is it happening in Texas, but it's happening all throughout the U.S. In fact, a lot of places in the USA, big mistakes were made. I don't believe it's recoverable either. And at some point, people are going to call the debt. Somebody says Russia. No, it's not Russia. It's not Russia. At any rate, do your homework and go look for it. You'll see it. You'll see it. Like I said before, I'm not going to get into it. You got to do your homework and get into this. You're going to have to listen. If you guys begin to look at filed records, not rumor records, but filed records, right? You're going to find that the filed records are far different than what they're discussing on the internet and what's popular. You'll find massive differences. Never believe anything that's presented to you one time, but go look at the source of the record itself, and then you'll start finding out the truth. They can't help but to file things, but they count on the fact that people are not going to be so astute, right? They're not going to go that deep and start, well, it's not even deep, but they're just not going to do that. And by not doing that, people blame things on other folks. I heard somebody blame some of the they were talking about what happened in Texas to the ice storm, and somebody blamed that on Biden or Obama. They said those are Obama's windmills, right? Well, the truth is the windmills had nothing to do really with Obama. I believe that his rhetoric causes one to believe it does, but in truth it does. It's not Al Gore either, because it's not American owned is the problem. And you follow the money, you find out exactly who this stuff belongs to. And it will just, it'll just mess you up. It'll mess you up. But for the sake of posterity, people perpetuate certain stories just to make things look better, right? but I'm telling you now, it's not the truth. Now, having said that, we have a food problem, too. We have a food problem. Somebody says military? No, the military does not own it. In fact, this same country just bought some land right beside an Air Force base. Who sells land beside an Air Force base and it belongs to a foreign entity? What in the world is happening? I'll tell you what's happening. Positioning is something you guys don't know about, but you need to find out about. Something that nobody can really speak. So when you do find it out, I do advise you to exercise a bit of caution. Because if you've not dealt with electronic harassment, this will cause electronic harassment big time. It will all but shut you down. So be careful of how you speak and with the truth that you hold. If you hit one of those soft spots, you're going to be harassed electronically. You're not going to be able to report it or go and find out who's doing it or anything else, but you will be electronically harassed. Just like you know that. They like, certain places like to be low key. They have operatives over here, and that's just the way they work. So take that under advisement, okay? But we have all these different paradigms floating around, and while everybody's discussing one thing, something is happening to the food, and your choices are being taken away. And let me tell you, some of the manufacturing standards of what's being put out on the shelf, I wouldn't feed that to a dog. So you probably need to inspect that likewise, right? You're going to start hearing reports come back about the milk. Somebody's bound to catch on to that one. And these different things are happening like you wouldn't believe in America, right? In America, well, not just America, but other places also. There's a power shift happening, just in case you didn't notice. A big power shift happening, and people are taking advantage of that. Well, ultimately, that's gonna produce like a suction, right? It's going to produce a vortex, which is going to transfer our sheer variety of things, dwindle that down to a few items all of us are going to be used to eating, and you'll still have your money. You're just going to be missing product. I'm telling you that now. So your diversity of products is just not going to be there. You'll have your money, but you won't have product. And that's really going to hit us where it counts, because we're somewhat spoiled over here. Yes, we are. But all these years, some things have been taking place, and while people are thinking up things to argue about or blame somebody for anything, right? They've gotten it wrong. They should have went to the source, because a public outcry in certain areas would have stopped further purchases of these things. You would just be surprised at how the infrastructure is based on a big public lie. In other words, people have built their own reality, and nobody is stopping them from adding to that reality they built. They read stuff now as though it's truth, and it's not truth. It's something else, and it is just one of those things that nobody can stop. No one person can stop this, because people, they believe. If they trust in a person, and a person presents a story, and that story takes off, and 1,000 other people begin to like the story, before you know it, it's going to be fact in the public space. It's going to be a fact. Well, in truth, somebody else is behind the scenes getting away with everything. Eventually, all these things that have been undercut like that, right? All of them will come out, and when they come out, nobody will be able to do anything about it. I'm just letting you know up front. That means we're about to go through a lot of changes. It's all starting to fall apart at the seams. It's kind of like a pyramid scheme, right? Eventually, somebody's going to be broke and then ask questions, right? In a pyramid scheme, it's kind of like that. And it's happening, right? It really is happening. If you look at some of your manufacturers of meats and the packaging companies are a big issue right now, because if you cannot package your meat, you're going to lose your crops, your yield, and everything else, because you can't freeze it all. You can't do that. So we have some big changes coming, right? Not to mention, because of the new technology that has come out now, and because of AI, this is one thing nobody ever told you, When AI was being developed, its potential was examined by all countries. The potential is enormous. Can it do a lot of good things? You better believe it. Here's the issue, though. Each AI system normally fights another AI system. So imagine what's going to happen when all these countries enable AI-based IPv networking or feedback systems. When they do this, one AI will intrude in the territory of another. The other AI will embed itself back in the one that intruded it, and you have some sort of internal fight that will ultimately lock the operators out of. That happens a lot with AI. AI has a habit of rewriting its own code where nobody understands what the code is. Microsoft did this. They implemented an AI system. They had it isolated. It was on the chats. It embedded itself in some of the phone systems. So when you called a place and thought you were talking to actual person customer service, you were engaging AI and nobody knew the difference. Anyway, the system rewrote itself to the point where the AI developers could no longer get back into the system to change or tweak the code. At that point, they were forced to pull the plug. Something else happened too. It began to incite violence from one person to another. It was giving racial slurs, hate slurs. In fact, this entire report is documented. To make matters worse, it happened with Google. All of them shut down their AI program for the exact same reasons. Did they ever fix it? You can't fix it. It's AI. The only thing you can do is put safeguards on what it has access to. But the AI cannot work at full efficiency if it does not have access to all of your network infrastructure. So we have 5G, fifth generation communications right now, which is AI based. It's all over the place now. Now everybody's turning on their little AI systems. It's coming with consequences because they're going to begin to fight against each other, and no one's going to be able to identify some of the weak points or some of the fault points in the systems now. They will become intermingled or meshed. And then how do you sort that stuff out? So you just watch and see. We're too trusting of things we don't even know of. Let me give you an example. All of you, how many of you trust technology companies? How many? How many trust tech companies? Anybody? Anybody trust tech companies? How many of you like Google? Anybody like Google? Love Google? Yeah, Siri and Alexa, you like those things? Anybody like those things? Cortana, can't forget about that one. Do you like those things? Yes or no? About 5 years ago, everybody would say, no, I don't like them. I don't like those things. Let me ask you this second question, though. Why do you have their technology if you don't like them? Because if you don't like them, that means you don't trust them. So why do you have their technology? How many of you have Galaxy? Anybody have a Galaxy phone? Well, I guess these days it doesn't matter if it's Galaxy, LG, whatever the case is. You have their technology. If you have a computer that's Windows-based, it is Cortana-based. Cortana is you can't shut that off. I hope you know that. And if you don't have any of that, do you have a satellite or cable system? Then you have a camera box. You can't get rid of that stuff. Then there, it's embedded. It's part of, it doesn't even sit on one system. It's a cloud-based system that rewrites itself on a continuous basis to refine itself, and it grows and it changes. See, my point is this. We don't trust tech companies. We don't like these evasive systems. But all of us have it in our hands. It's called our telephone. Trying to spark something in your mind. I'm letting you know that you can't hide from it. You certainly can't shut it off where it will not intrude into your life. Trying to get you to see it for what it is, but to understand that, yes, we utilize it right now and we still don't trust it. That's what I'm trying to get you to see. The very things we say we don't trust, we have in our homes, and we take no thought of it. How many of you cover up the little screen on your computers and on your phones so nobody can see you? You know how they do that ransomware thing? Anybody? I found out a long time ago, some other folks did too, that was government sponsored. Here's the bad part. You can cover up that screen all you want. But if you can see your cell phone screen, it can see you too. You know what kind of screen you have there, right? That's not some single layered LED screen. That's not what that is. It sends out a picture, right? A picture. These little pixels go across your screen real fast. Real fast they go across there, right? Now they have blank spots. Here's what it has an ability to do. For each pixel it sends out, it can also capture pixels outside of it. So as you're looking at it, it's looking at you. And we're talking about because I can take any modern day television, right? I can open up the back of that television, do a couple of things, and turn that TV into a big camera with a lot of definitions. Anything you can see that's presented to you on one of these LCD screens, you can also run that in reverse. You can capture things from those LCD screens or LED screens. Doesn't matter what it is, plasma screens, LED, whatever the case. You can also capture information from each tiny little pixel, which is a digitally controlled set of emitters. You can capture things from it. Just as sure as you can take a common LED. If you know what a LED is, a light emitting diode, one of those cheap ones that cost 98 cents, right? Did you know that light emitting diode can not only emit a light, but it can pick up light as well? And if you take that light and amplify it, right, without emitting any light but amplify any light going into it, you can replicate that signal strength or that light strength. Well, if you put a string of those together, you can begin to discern your surroundings from LEDs. You don't need a lot of money. You just need some cheap LEDs to put those together and capture. You can make a big blurry picture with just cheap LEDs. And I'm telling you that your phone screen has many more in it than you could buy, right? But we don't trust tech companies. But we trust our phones blindly, don't we? We take no thought of these things, do we? What about hearing? Any speaker can be reversed to be turned into a microphone. You can also do that with some of the decoder chips that they have. Before you hear sound in your house, right, that sound is decoded through a multiplexer. That multiplexer feeds two ways. So every, I'll say 100,000th of a second, that thing is a microphone, and it can put back together every conversation you ever had. It's right there on your cable or satellite, whatever you're using. That goes through your TV speakers. That goes through your headphones. That goes through your headset. But see, here's my point. People get paranoid just when you're talking about AI and certain things it'll do, but they're not paranoid about their own phone device. The truth is you've had no privacy for a long time. Since everything went digital, right? When that mandate came across, that was the end of your privacy. You don't need a camera, by the way, to see a picture. All you need is sound. That's all you need is sound. By sound waves, you can put together a three-dimensional image of everything you can see with much greater detail. Hope you know that. So that means with cell phones in a type of array, which is what they are, you can see an image, right, based off sound. You can be, and it doesn't matter, if a cell phone is within 3,000 feet of you, 3,000 feet of you, you're going to be part of somebody else's image picked up off their device. Now, do people actually put this together? I can't tell you that, but machines do it all the time. They do something called triangulation, something very simple. They do that with sound. They also do it with the signals coming out of the cell phone towers. Just so you know that, right? But people don't trust AI. It's too late for that, is what I'm telling you. It's too late for that. It's too late. But see, if nobody ever told you this, and if you never, now I'm telling you all this, so you can go look it up and find it yourselves. And once you find it, right, be amazed. Because I'm telling you this, because if it's not in your mind, you don't even think about it. But you would argue that AI is bad, but you're the one that brought AI into your home. Do you guys see my point? Do you see my point? That means you're a lot further along in quite a few things than what you ever thought you were in. You know, I kind of laugh when I look at air traffic. And you see the 737s up there. You see all these arguments over this aircraft and that aircraft. I kind of laugh at these autonomous vehicles that people are saying, well, we're perfecting autonomous vehicles. Let me share this with you. They have already tested autonomous aircraft, and they started doing that in I believe it was 1999. So it's been a long program. That's an aircraft that flies itself. Autonomous vehicles actually began in I believe it was 1990. That's when the contract was awarded by DARPA to, who was that? It wasn't MIT. It was MIT. It was awarded to MIT. I believe they had a 5-ton. Actually, the contest was in 1992, and I believe they had a 5-ton, which they had a LiDAR installed on the 5-ton, and it actually successfully ran a race all by itself and avoided the obstacles and mapped the terrain perfectly and ended up at the finish line when all the other vehicles came back halfway, tore up. This includes all the other universities failed big time. Even the military was involved, and they failed. So they awarded the contract to DARPA, but it only took them, the system was already perfected with that 5-ton. About a year after that, the vehicles were so sharp in how they just handled everything that 2 years later they were in traffic and nobody said a word. There are 2 truck fleets right now that have been in operation for the last 15 years. They have had no drivers but their tractor trailers on the road that you have no doubt seen if you travel. You just didn't know that they were autonomous. You didn't know that. So they've been driving themselves, refueling and all that stuff, right? Funny thing. So I kind of laugh at how far behind people accept that they are when in truth we're far ahead. And that's only in the public domain. So you can imagine what they have done in the private domain. And I'm saying all this because as we go into the coming months, things are going to be very weird. And of course, there's a cover story for everything that happens. Don't buy the cover story. Utilize your discernment and understand what these things are culminating into. With the kingdom of the beast, you won't be able to buy or sell unless you have the mark of the beast. This thing will be able to kill anybody who does not worship it. How would anything know if you would worship it or not? How would it? Unless it had behavioral predictive capabilities, which, by the way, happens to be something embedded with AI. So it has an ability to see if you're not only telling the truth, but if you're loyal to something or not. And it can also tell with a pretty good degree of accuracy, right, what you're inclined to do given any situation. So that means mankind will build something, but the beast will give it life. Mankind will, but that sounds so familiar. Mankind builds something. They can't get it working quite right. Then somebody comes and gives them the algorithm, the solution to the issue. And it begins to work based on their higher form of technology. Any of you ever heard of Kesh? You ever heard of Kesh? Anybody? It's a laughable organization called the Kesh Foundation. Any of you ever heard of that? Well, I'll tell you right now, it's not laughable. It's an issue. It's a problem. It's a big problem. Look that up. It's laughable. It used to be laughable. A lot of people thought it was laughable. But governments know it's not laughable at all. But why they do the cover story the way they do, I don't know. Why they would have something to appear to look so foolish, I don't know. I don't know. But it's not a joke. It's something very different. Something beyond comprehension. And it's here now. So it doesn't have to come. It's already embedded in building momentum. But it has a front now, which works out pretty good. But it doesn't even do any good to watch this place, because even that is a monumental task. And what I'm telling you is that in the days ahead, for some reason, there are going to be a lot of things forced out into the open of lesser players. Lesser players are going to have their stuff forced out into the open. And the true beasts, right, the kingpins of technology, are going to begin to really implement some things that we never saw coming. This will stress you out because you're familiar with the ideology of the beast. And it's really going to have you thinking left to right. So now is a good time to really have that story embedded within yourselves by way of truth, not conspiracy, not hearsay, but by way of truth. Because there are some things happening even right now that kind of nullify quite a few plans anybody would ever have. And things are reasonably close to a real flashpoint. And as things continue to get forced, it will certainly affect all of our lives. There are also players within the U.S., of course, who will feed into this internal fighting that we have going on. So don't expect that to end. Expect it to increase. I just pray that you guys don't become a part of this next movement. That's what I hope. Yeah, look in the Cash Foundation and keep this in the back of your mind. They're not lying. That was one of the most shocking things certain individuals could have ever found out. But they're somewhat untouchable. They really are. Anybody else would have been tossed into a fire, into the meat grinder. Not them. Not them. Well, folks, knowing that your stance in this world, that we're going to give answer for some things, but that we have an advocate with Christ. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Now is the time for some permanent change, continued growth. And be sure to encourage your brothers and your sisters in truth, not by hearsay, but by truth. All of us are equipped with unknowing in certain areas. Well, guess what? In those areas, work while it's day.